5 running backs. It's not all about Damien Williams, guys. Week 4 basically in the books, looking ahead to week 5, and it's all about Damien Williams when looking at the waiver wire at the running back position. At least he's definitely the number 1 target heading into week 5. When we take a look at the David Montgomery injury to his knee, it looks as though that's going to be at least a 1-week injury, most likely a multi-week injury. It does look like he avoided the season-long injury, so we don't know how long Damien Williams is going to be a guy we're going to be able to utilize in our lineups, but it does look like, at the very least for the short term, Damien Williams is going to be a guy that's going to get the bulk of the carries in the Chicago Bears backfield, that as long as Justin Fields is the quarterback, they are probably going to want to be a run-first offense. As long as they can get that running game going the way they did on Sunday, I don't know why they would go away from that. And Damien Williams, once David Montgomery left the game, picked up right where Montgomery left off. He was extremely effective in this offense. Now, he sustained a little bit of an injury, but it looks as though it's a minor injury. He should be ready to go on Sunday and take the bulk of the reps for the Chicago Bears, who are really thin beyond Williams. So this is a guy who should get a bulk of the work. We know he can be effective in both the running game and the passing game. You're talking about a guy who is, extremely effective in and instrumental in the Kansas City Chiefs winning a Super Bowl just a couple of years ago. So obviously this is a guy who is very talented and can be effective in this league. And he should be the number 1 target at the running back position. He's available in 90% of leagues and has the Las Vegas Raiders heading into week 5. That's a great matchup for Williams. He should be able to be productive in that matchup. The Bears should be able to lean on the running game as long as they can keep Derek Carr and that vaunted passing attack under control. Now, once again, I don't think he's coming off the field in a negative game script. I think he'll be heavily involved in the passing game in a negative game script. So this is a guy, even in a negative game script situation, is going to be effective for your team as long as David Montgomery is out. And it looks like we won't know until Wednesday how long that is going to be. Next guy, moving on. This is a guy who is going to get lost in the shuffle because of how attractive Damien Williams is. But if you miss out on Williams, Kenneth Gainwell is another guy that is a kind of a must-add at this point when you look at how he is slowly asserting himself in this backfield over Miles Sanders. Right now, we're looking at a guy who has overtaken Miles Sanders in week 4 in touches. It was 11 touches to Gainwell to 10 to Miles Sanders. This guy at this point has outproduced Sanders in the PPR format. And at this point has a stock going up compared to Sanders' stock going down. And right now, I understand the Philadelphia backfield isn't very attractive when you look at how much of that rushing game is going to Jalen Hurst. But at the same time, if Kenneth Gainwell continues to assert himself over Miles Sanders, he's going to be a guy, especially in the PPR format, that will be usable for your roster. Out there right now, in 75.4% of leagues, has Carolina on Friday. Now, we've seen Carolina now moving the ball with Sam Darnold, not forcing the ball into bad situations, starting to use his legs. Carolina is a competent offense. And if this at all becomes a negative game script situation, that obviously goes to Gainwell. And right now, I don't even know if Gainwell needs a negative game script situation to overtake Miles Sanders. There is something that this coaching staff obviously likes more than they like Miles Sanders. Now, remember, this guy played at Memphis. He was the one that kept Antonio Gibson at bay He's very talented, would have gone higher than the 5th round had he played in 2020, but he sat out. He fell to the 5th round, and many thought that this guy was the 3rd best prospect at the position in this draft. Fell to the 5th, doesn't mean that's his pedigree. Kenneth Gainwell, 75% available. Somebody that you should look at adding, especially in PPR formats. Next guy, more of a standard format guy, and Michael Carter for the New York Jets. He has slowly asserted himself atop that roster. He looks like the lead dog. It looked like maybe he was vying for that bone with Ty Johnson. I still think Johnson might still be there, but I think this is now turning into Carter's backfield. This is what everybody hoped for, but nobody was patient enough to wait for. And because of that, he's available in 43% of leagues, with Atlanta coming up in week 5. In a standard format especially, I think Michael Carter should be a viable player at the flex position in a standard format. Could be for a desperate owner. I guess he could go into that running back too, as long as you don't have too high expectations. But he's getting those, if he gets those double-digit touches against Atlanta, he has the potential to produce. And this Michael Carter is going to be a guy who you're going to have to start. He's not going to be a stable to your lineup. He is depth for your roster. But if you can add somebody to your roster who's getting double-digit touches in a backfield at some point in the season, he should be somebody who should be useful in a starting role at some point. The next guy, man, PPR. He's a PPR guy. And honestly, I want to see it more, but I honestly don't know if New England has really anybody else to fill this role. They've always had this role. This guy's always been a special teamer. Brandon Bolden. Like, the funny thing about Brandon Bolden is he's always been a guy that break in case of emergency. He's always been special teamer. But when their backfield has gotten injured over the past few years, he's gotten opportunities, and he's always honestly looked pretty good in the role. Never been given any more opportunity, but James White's gone. J.J. Taylor fumbled the ball away. We know what that means in a Bill Belichick system. It's the doghouse, and it's typically worse than Bruce Arians' doghouse. Just saying. And there's really Ramondre Stevenson, he fumbled the ball away on his second touch ever in the NFL. So, like, the other guys that are there are already in the doghouse. Right now, it looks like Brandon Bolden is the only guy to be that receiving back, which they always have a role for. He got 3 receptions after James White went down in week 3. Week 4, 6 receptions. You know, when we heading into week 3, James White had 6 receptions in every single game. In PPR format, Brandon Bolden had 11 points last week. It's not great, but it's a floor. And he does have the ability in that role to get one of those unique pass-catching touchdowns inside the red zone that New England is known for. Zero format guys, once desperate owners, you can do worse in a PPR format than Brandon Bolden. These next couple guys are, if I'm an owner of Chris Carson, for example, I'm going out and I'm getting Alex Collins. Alex Collins is 99% available. He produced quite well in week 4. Chris Carson didn't produce as well. It was 13 touches for Carson to 10 for Alex Collins. That was a strange aberration. we've never really seen that before. This has always been Chris Carson's backfield. The backup's always gotten a handful of touches at most. So that, to me, perked my curiosity. I haven't seen anything about Chris Carson being injured, but I honestly can't remember the last time I really saw another running back in this backfield get double-digit touches when Chris Carson's been healthy. So that did pique my interest. If I'm a Chris Carson owner, knowing his injury history, I want to go out and I'm going to go get Alex Collins right now. I'm going to stick him on my roster because he definitely looks like the next man up. And I know we've been down the Alex Collins road, but this is one of those offenses that typically produces with running backs, and Alex Collins, and they've always gone with a 1A, the guy running back, and that would be Alex Collins, next man up. And as a Carson owner, I'd want that. If as far as some guys that I would go look for that are out there in about 25% of leagues-ish, Zack Moer available right now in 27% of leagues. He's better in standard, but he is utilized in the passing game. We're talking about a guy who has flex appeal in both, 4 touchdowns in 3 games. He's averaging over 4 yards per carry in this offense, which is much, much improved over his rookie year. He's got 16 touches last week on rushing the ball. It looks like they are at least willing to use him more running. Josh Allen looks more like a passer, ceding a little bit more of the rushing work to the running backs. Looks like Buffalo finally has a couple running backs that are in that flex-worthy consideration. And right now, Moss actually is in that back-end RB2 consideration, and he's out there in 27% of leagues. Another guy, Cordell Patterson, out there in 26% of leagues, 5 touchdowns in 4 weeks, averaging 12.5 touches since week 2, over 100 yards from scrimmage in the last 2 weeks. Need I say more? This guy's been fucking awesome. And I think a lot of it has to do with everybody's talking about, well, what's wrong with Kyle Pitts? And it just, more reports and more reports and more reports about how much defenses are giving Kyle Pitts the superstar treatment. Then you got Calvin Ridley, and we know the passing chops of Cordarrelle Patterson, and they've been utilizing that in Atlanta. It's been working because defenses have had to focus so much on Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts. Cordarrelle Patterson's getting work every week, 12.5 touches since week 2. He's getting about 6 to 7 touches in the rushing game. He's getting about 6 to 8 targets in the passing game. And he's still out there in 26% of leagues. Poor man's Josh Jacobs, James Conner. He's out there in 31% of leagues. He's a poor man's Josh Jacobs, if you ask me. He's incredibly inefficient with his touches, but he's getting a lot of work, and he's finding ways to fall into the end zone because he's on a elite offense right now. Out there in 32% of leagues, so there's a 1/3 chance that you can pick him up off the waiver wire, and he is catching some balls. He's probably more efficient in his touches in the passing game than he is in the rushing game, but he's getting double-digit touches. He's on a high-octane offense. They aren't running Kyler Murray the way they were last year. He is still utilizing his legs in the red zone, but obviously they are utilizing their running backs more, and despite his inefficiency per touch basis, he's finding ways to get in the end zone. You can definitely do worse than James Conner. And finally, Trey Sermon, running back for the San Francisco 49ers. This guy's the guy that, if I have Eli Mitchell, I want him. If it's when Eli Mitchell comes back, this is going to be an extremely confusing backfield, and I don't know if we'll ever see it really iron out to this is the guy. And we've seen this through the last couple of years. It continues to happen with the San Francisco backfield. If you can guess which running back is going to be the guy, it typically is pretty good for your lineup. And that's why I would want Trey Sermon on my on my roster. He's also available in about 32% of leagues. He's got 29 rushes in the last 2 weeks, but once again, still worried about Elijah Mitchell coming back and maybe reasserting himself in that role, because he did in his one shining moment week 1 looked more efficient with his touches than Trey Sermon has to date. And, they did mention about how they thought Mitchell had better burst than Sermon. So I want to add Sermon because I think he's got potential. You want whoever that starting running back is going to be in San Francisco. It's just, are you going to be able to guess which running back is going to be the guy from week to week? I'd like to thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe. Every Sunday morning, I join Mike Lynch and Rashad Taylor on 1080 The Fan for the Fantasy Scramble. We answer your start-sit questions. You can send in your start-sit questions to 503-250-1080. You can listen live to the Odyssey link that I will have in the description below, and we will answer your start-sit questions for you right before kickoff there. We take these questions from 9:30 a.m. Pacific time up to kickoff, so you have a half-hour window there to get your start-sit questions in and get those final last-minute worries out of the way. Thank you again for watching, and make sure you look out for the wide receiver ads for week 5.